5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you for being with us. On Tuesday, you said any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position should have known that an unclassified system was no place for these conversations. You said on Tuesday some of her emails bore classified markings, and you also said on Tuesday there were potential violations of the appropriate statutes. Now, I know a bunch of prosecutors back home would look at that fact pattern, look at that evidence. You even referenced it in your opening statement. Some of your friends in the prosecution business have been on TV saying they'd have looked at that same evidence and they would have taken it to a grand jury. But on Tuesday you said, and today in your opening statement you said, no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. And then in your statement Tuesday you cite factors that helped you make that decision and make that statement. And one of the factors you said was consider the context of a person's actions. Now, typically when I hear context in the course of a criminal investigation, it's from the defense side, not the prosecution side. It's at the end of the case after there's been a trial and a guilty verdict, and it's during the sentencing phase, mitigating circumstances. That's the context we typically think about, but you said it on the front end. You said consider the context of the person's actions, and so I'm curious, what does consider the context mean? Because a lot of Americans are thinking just what the chairman talked about in his opening statement, that there are two standards. One for we the people and one for the politically connected. A lot of folks I get the privilege of representing back in Ohio think that when you said consider the context, they think that's what Mr. Gowdy just talked about. The fact that she's former First Lady, former Secretary of State, former Senator, major party's nominee for the highest office in the land, and oh, by the way, her husband just met with the individual you work with at an airport in Arizona 5 days ago. So you said none of that influenced your decision, but tell us what consider the context means.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jordan. What I was trying to capture is the fact that the exercise of prosecutorial discretion is always a judgment call. It is in every single case. And among the things you consider are, what was this person's background? What was the circumstances of the offense? Were they drunk? Were they inflamed by passion? Was it somebody who had a sufficient level of education and training and experience that we can infer certain things from that? To consider the entire circumstances of the person's offense conduct and background. I did not mean to consider political context or things like that.
The entire circumstances, and Mr. Gowdy just talked about this scheme. Remember what she did, right? She sets up this unique server arrangement. She alone controls it. On that server, on that email system are her personal emails, her work-related emails, Clinton Foundation information, and now we know classified information. This gets discovered. We find out this arrangement exists. Then what happens? Her lawyers, her legal team decides which ones we get and which ones they get to keep. They made the sort on the front end. And then we find out the ones that they kept and didn't give to us, didn't give to the American people, didn't give to Congress, the ones they kept, they destroyed them. And you don't have to take my word, I'll take what you said on Tuesday. They deleted all emails that they did not return to the State Department, and the lawyers cleaned their devices in such a way as to preclude complete forensic recovery. Now that sounds like a fancy way of saying they hid the evidence, right? And you just told Mr. Gowdy thousands of emails fell into those categories. Now, that seems to me to provide some context to what took place here. Did Secretary Clinton's legal team, let me ask it this way. Did Secretary Clinton know her legal team deleted those emails that they kept from us?
I don't believe so.
Did Secretary Clinton approve those emails being deleted?
I don't think there was any specific instruction or conversation between the Secretary and her lawyers about that.
Did you ask that question?
Yes.
Did Secretary Clinton know that her lawyers cleaned devices in such a way as to preclude complete forensic recovery?
I don't believe that she did.
Did you ask that question?
Yes.
Do you see how someone could view the context of what she did? Set up a private system. She alone controlled it. She kept everything on it. We now know from Ms. Abedin's deposition that they did it for that very reason, so no one could see what was there, based on the deposition Ms. Abedin gave. And then when they got caught, they deleted what they had, and they scrubbed their devices. Is that part of the context in evaluating this decision?
Sure, sure. And understand what inferences can be drawn from that collection of facts, of course.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Comey, I appreciate your conduct of this investigation in a nonpartisan way, in keeping with the sterling reputation which has led presidents of both parties to appoint you to highly placed law enforcement positions in our federal government. I want to say for the record that this hearing, where you call the prosecutor and Mr. Comey stands in the place of the prosecutor, because the Attorney General has accepted entirely the FBI's recommendations, where you call the prosecutor to give account for the decision to prosecute or not a particular individual raises serious questions of separation of powers, and particularly when you're questioning the prosecutor's decision with respect to the decision to prosecute or not a particular individual, it raises serious bill of attainder constitutional questions. These hearings are so often accusatory that they yield no guidance as to how to conduct business in the future. And that's the way it looks. It looks as though that is how this hearing is going. Now, of course, now everyone understands in the abstract why it is important for security reasons to use official government mail or email rather than private email if security matters are involved. And that's a very broad, wide proposition. Now, there are no rules, so far as I know, requiring members of Congress to use their as to how they use their official email accounts, whether involving security or not. The chairman of this committee lists his personal account, for example, on his business card. No one says that's wrong. I don't know if it's wrong or right, because there's no guidance. Federal agency employees, members of Congress, often have secure information, or at least sensitive information that shouldn't be made public. Some of our members are on the Intelligence Committee or the Defense Committee or even this committee and may have such matters. Some of these matters may concern national security issues. I don't know if something as sensitive as the itinerary, as if you're going on a Codell, as to the route you are taking and where you will be, all that could be on people's personal emails. Of course, this is legislative branch, and I spoke of separation of powers. I'm not indicating that there should be a government-wide sense that is ordained from on high, but there ought to be rules that everybody understands about, especially after the Clinton episode, about the use of personal email. So I'd like your insight for guidance as far as other federal employees are concerned, or even members of Congress and their staff, because I think we could learn from this episode. So strictly from a security standpoint, do you believe that federal employees, staff, even members of Congress should attempt guidance on the issue of the use of personal emails versus some official form of communication? What should we learn from the process the Secretary has gone through? I'm sure there will be questions about how there was even confusion, for example, in the State Department. But what should we learn when it comes to our own use of email or the use of federal employees on this question?
May I answer, Mr. Chairman? The most important thing to learn is that an unclassified email system is no case for an email conversation about classified matters. And by that I mean either sending a document as an attachment over unclassified email that is classified, or having a conversation about something that is a classified subject on an unclassified email system. That's the focus of the concern. That's the focus of this investigation. That it was also a personal email adds to the concern about the case because of the security vulnerabilities associated with a personal system. But the root of the problem is people using unclassified systems to conduct business that is classified. And so all of us should have access to, if we have access to classified information, classified communication systems. Right? The FBI has 3 levels: unclassified system, a secret system, and a top secret system. You can email on all 3. But you need to make sure you don't email on the unclassed system, even if that's a government classified system, about matters that are classified. That's the important lesson to learn. Everybody ought to be aware of it. Everybody ought to be trained on it. I'm training on it in the FBI to make sure folks are sensitive to the need to move a classified discussion, even if it doesn't involve sending a document, to the appropriate forum.
Members of Congress included.
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll now